Sports4CLE continues from Radio Row at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana. We're pleased to be joined by Marc Ross, an insider on NFL Network. Marc, let's talk a little bit about free agency. Relative to the Browns, team that we cover, they need some offensive linemen. Are there?
They start free agency in their offensive line room. Just say prioritize those guys, like try to sign them.
Can you get enough in free agency on the offensive line that isn't ridiculously expensive? So they're not going to be able to sign a bunch of top-end guys, obviously.
Yeah, and I think with O-lines you can see that, I mean, you don't need 5 all-pro guys up front. You just need good players. And, we've kind of seen that with just the teams that are in the Super Bowl. But the better your quarterback, the more they help your offensive line. So that's the other part of this as well. Like, yeah, you got to get some solid dudes, but what are we doing at the quarterback to help these guys out? So a lot of interesting decisions where, with the 5 starters, like free, I don't think I've ever seen that with Cleveland. So it'll be fun to see how they piece this together.
You were in personnel department with the Giants for a long time, number of years. Are there conversations going on in say the Browns personnel department relative to offensive line, wide receiver, when you're trying to rebuild basically an offense? Are you piecing it together and taking a look at different scenarios?
Your off-season plan, you're planning this the whole off-season. You're stacking your board. You're putting your value together where you're just like a draft board. It's the same thing with free agency. You've got your quarterback's value, running backs, et cetera, and then within that, okay, the third offensive tackle is more value than the first DN. So that's these conversations that you're having all offseason, and that's really where you have to have a great GM and a head coach who work together and a scouting staff that communicate all of this together so that when you go attack it, and you also stack it up against the draft. Okay, well, the edge rush group in free agency is not that great, but the draft is great in edge rushers, let's just say. So then you have your game plan of, all right, well, let's attack free agency knowing we need this, and then let's leave this to the draft and go in this direction. So, but that all comes down to the communications and that point person who's putting this all together.
All right, let's turn our attention to the draft. Scouting Combine first position groups were, earlier in the week. Quarterbacks, wide receivers a little bit later towards the weekend. When you sit here, what's the biggest question that gets answered at the Combine for a personnel guy?
Well, this is, different teams put different value on different things here. Some it's the interview process. Some still do the workout, the actual movement. Some it's the timing aspect of it. So the best teams, the best drafts I've been around is when you already have your foundation that's been set from all the work your scouts have been doing throughout the year, and then once you get here, you're really just massaging certain things or just answering a little bit of questions that you should have. And receivers, separating, well, this guy ran this guy ran that, this guy jumped this, and massaging it a little bit between the value that you've already placed. So for me, it was really about, hey, look, the work's been done. These guys are on what they've done, put on film. That's most important, and this is just a little tickle, the sprinkle on top.
All right, so 6 and 24 were the Browns draft. The thought is offensive lineman, wide receiver. When you look at this draft, what do you think is going to be there at 6, and if this guy is there, man, that's good for them.
I think either there's more value for an offensive lineman at 6 than a receiver. I think this receiver group lacks a true number one like in years past, or 4 true number ones like in years past, because this is kind of I think you can get some good number 2s and 3s here in this. So I think the offensive line group is a lot more intriguing, where you have some high-end talent that's there. And just using Will Campbell, he went 4th last year as a benchmark. I think there's some players, a group of 3 or 4 guys that are comparable talent to what Will Campbell was. So sitting there at 6, I think that value for Cleveland is going to be really strong. And then at 24, these receivers look a lot better down there than taking it up there. And I think it'll fall really nice with those, if those 2 are the position groups of how the board will play out.
Are there some guys, wide receiver-wise, at 24 that you think might be pretty good players?
Yeah. I mean, that whole group you've been hearing about, Tyson and Carnell and all, that'd be great. Y'all to keep the guy in state there. I don't know if he'll make it down that far, but that whole group there. The USC, he's Lemon, a fun. Yeah. Lemon's a fun player. I'm trying to recall all the guys that I've, I
Boston,
remember numbers.
yeah.
I remember numbers when I watch numbers
Yeah.
and uniforms, the names. I got to have my cheat sheet. But when you're looking at that group, I think you'll get have a nice mix, and they're different. They're all different. That's what's fun about these guys. It's you got the small shifty dude, you got the smooth moving dude, you got the tough inside guy. So there's a nice little mix.
Well, from your experience, what skill sets in wide receivers seem to translate?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if I see this guy, I know it's probably going to work in the NFL.
Can they catch?
I teed you up for that.
That's number one. But no, I think speed's overrated. It's can you run a route? Whatever your particular, whether it's through speed, whether it's through quickness, whether it's through change of direction, can you run a route and catch the ball? And a guy like talk about another Ohio State guy, Jackson Smith and Jigba. When you look at him, it's like you just see him just getting open and catching the ball, right? Because he can just run. And Cooper Kupp did that for years. It's talking about is staying with those guys. So that's really what you're looking for. That guys that have that feel to know how to run routes to get open and then can catch it.
When you look at recent history, it seems like there's more and more trades in the NFL than there used to be. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I think when I first started with the NFL Network, we had the trade special and all 6 years ago. Nobody makes trades. This was just 6 years ago. Why are we having a whole week of shows dedicated to this? Nobody does it. And then lo and behold, a team like the Rams that did that, F those picks and, make trades and do all that, and then they win a Super Bowl. So now everybody's looking why can't we do it like the Rams? And that's a real thing. We got to do it like that. Thus, the Eagles did a great job as well, with Howie Roseman and A.J. Brown trade, things like that. So once a team kind of breaks the mold and then sets the example and wins, then other teams follow suit with that.
Do you expect that to you think more of that will happen again this year?
Yeah.
Some people think this is, because free agency is kind of and the quarterback draft class is not great.
For sure, and then definitely just bringing up Seattle again, the trade they made for Rashid Shaheed this year. That one move, they might have won it anyway, but that one move, you saw the infusion of explosiveness and playmaking that he brought to that team. So, again, other teams are looking we could be one piece away and do what Seattle did. They just won a Super Bowl by doing this. So that blueprint is there. That winning strategy is there. So, yeah, we'll take a shot at it as well.
When you were looking at quarterbacks, what traits with quarterbacks kind of seem to transfer over? In other words, if you were looking for a quarterback, what was something you wanted to see on tape from him?
Yeah, it's to me, it was always guys that could raise the level of whoever's around them, not be dictated. You hear that a lot. Well, he doesn't have an offense. He doesn't have this. Okay, well, the great players raise the level of their team of making everyone else better, and they dictate the circumstances for the most part and make winning plays in winning situations. And if you look at across the board, even though most of the great quarterbacks in the NFL are completely different in their size, their arm strength, their move, whatever, you see those, okay, that guy raises the level of what's going on in that organization. And to me, that's what you really need to be identifying.
How does it... Can a guy learn to play from within the pocket? Is that a skill, or is that something you either have, or
I
it's
think
really
you just
hard
kind
to
of have it, that innate feel, that natural ability to feel what's around you and be able to keep your vision and go through your progressions. I think that's something that is kind of born and innate. You can get a little bit better at it, but I think when you first start watching a guy, to me, scouting him, you can kind of see that, whereas others, he didn't see that rush. He's got his eyes on one guy, and those guys, it's kind of tough to coach them into being those sort of players.
So when you look at the Browns' offense, it struggled mightily. The question is, offensive line, wide receiver, quarterback. All of them are interrelated.
Yeah.
Does a upgraded offensive line help the quarterback play and the wide receiver play?
Well, it depends on who your quarterback is. So, as you've seen, sometimes it just doesn't matter who you got up there. It's, all right, our defense held them to 13 points, and we couldn't get a first down. We don't have anybody. So, yes, all of the above. Yes, all of the above. It all comes down. You got to have that foundation at quarterback and then build around it and take as many good players as possible. But it starts there.
When I look at really good offenses, they have a wide receiver that you're worried about throughout the league. I can't remember. Even last year, Jerry Jeudy played well for the Browns. He had over 1,000 yards. I don't think he was a guy that defenses said, man, we can't let him do this to us.
Yeah.
Am I making too much of that elite playmaking wide receiver?
That's a real thing. And as we saw with Jackson Smith and Jigba and what he did in the playoffs and in Super Bowl, like, okay, they shut him down, but it was like their game plan. Well, we're not going to let him beat us. Like, okay, well, it opens up everything else in the offense when you have that guy. And, with the Giants with our 2 Super Bowls, we had a Plaxico Burress in the first run where NFC Championship game, they're going to play man-to-man on him. Like, hey, let's just keep throwing to him. And then the second run, we had Victor Cruz and Hakeem Nicks who just, like, okay, like, let's go. So when you see that nowadays with the great receivers, how they just change how defenses have the game plan against them. If you can't get an 11-play drive, this one play can break it open, huge third downs. What do we do? Go to that guy, So, yeah, you see the value in that year in and year out, and all teams are really trying to get that.
I guess for Browns fans, that would be similar to what offenses look at when they're looking at Myles Garrett. That's that type of guy on the offensive side.
I make that comparison a lot. I did it earlier. I forgot to mention it here. Like the guys right here. Yeah, and I said it. Like when you're going to a game, you're like, okay, well, we got to put 2 and 3 guys on him every play. Okay, well, it opens up all these other guys to feast and make plays, and then it hinders your offense as well. Steelers game where we just can't function as an offense. Let's just get off the field and keep it moving. So yeah, they receivers can tilt the game the same way a dominant edge rusher can.
So if I'm hearing you right, there really isn't a true kind of number one can't miss slam dunk wide receiver in your opinion?
I don't have it. I think there's some good players, but not like in years past where there was some big time guys who are saying, oh man, this guy's going to be the truth. I think there's guys that you'll like to have, but I don't see a guy where it's like, okay, we got to go stop this guy.
Of the linemen, is there a guy that you look at and you go, man, this guy has a really, really high ceiling?
The Miami, he's my favorite. He's my favorite out of watching these guys. They're 2 good guards, Penn State and then Texas A&M. Those guys are like, just put them right in right away. They'll start and just go play, guards. But, a lot of interesting prospects. The Utah guys there. So, yeah, but Miami by far is my favorite dude.
Marc Ross, appreciate the time.
Yeah,
thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Marc Ross, make sure you check him out NFL Network. He is one of the NFL Network insiders, always great and insightful coverage. Sports4CLE from the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana will continue. Stay with us.